Hello and welcome back to another Island 54 development stream where I'm building a survival crafting MMO in Unity and TypeScript. I finished up the last stream getting my unit tests for my new netcode working, and we now have all the unit tests passing, which is great. I still haven't tested the other side of the netcode, which is this apply delta stuff, but we should be able to at least start integrating the generation of deltas. And then once I start integrating the apply delta as well, which I'll write some unit tests for, we should be able to actually start reducing the traffic. Welcome back, a random guy. Now, it looks like I'm having some troubles with connecting to Twitch. Hold on a second. Yes, anyone on Twitch, I'm not sure if I'll be able to see your messages. Restream is saying that we don't have messages from Twitch. But anyway, apparently we are sending stuff out to Twitch, so I don't know what the story is there. Let me just have one more crack at getting that set up properly. Applications. Not sure what has gone wrong there. It's only connected to YouTube for some reason. That's cool. Now, I'm almost ready to move on. I'm just going to send a quick testing message. And that has not come up in Restream. Right, I'll just put a note. It'll only take me a moment and I'll get back into it. All right. So, just going to recap where I'm at, just to remind myself. Somebody, I think the name was Dota2 Attitude, I think it was unhappy with all the exclamation marks I have on my component.id references all over the place. Where was that? Somewhere in here. Component.id. Yeah, so I have all these exclamation marks to force this optional ID to not be undefined. I happen to know that these are never going to be undefined when we get into this code, but ideally I would have changed this type. Now, I tried off stream to change it to use a similar pattern to my entities, where I have this concept of a transient entity that does not have an ID defined, because when a new entity is coming in, we don't know what the ID is, versus an entity that has been stored in the database, in which case it does have an ID. I tried doing the same thing for component, but it got really messy. The problem is that entities themselves refer to components, and I don't know at different times whether these are transient or not transient. And to clean that up, I'd actually need to make a slight change to my protocol. The change would be at the moment, components can have an update type. Well, they sometimes have an ID. They usually have an ID. But their ID is only set in updates, invalidations, and deletes. In the event that we're creating a new one, we don't have an ID. So to fix this up, I'd have to actually have under my entity type, entity update type, here it is here, I'd need to break out component updates and deletions and invalidations versus creates and have those as a separate field. I'm not going to do that right now, so I'll just stick with these exclamation marks. This code is going to get integrated into my UDP transmitter. So let's go find my UDP transmitter. It is down here, and we've got this datagram generator. So if we look at the code, the actual datagram generator, what does it do? Well, let's go back to where we actually receive a packet. I think that happens, sorry, when we start sending a packet. What it does is it goes and asks for a list of all of the sessions. For each one, it looks it up. Well, we've already got it out of the sessions server, so that comes out of a different service. We get our sessions back. And then for each one, if we know where the remote end of that connection is, which means that they've sent a packet to us, so we know how to contact them, then we go and generate a packet for them. And that packet comes from here, and all we do at the moment is we go and construct a server message for this session. All it does, it grabs a copy of the player so that we know where the player is. Then it goes off and it asks the entity server to tell it all of the entities within range of it, both the static and the dynamic ones. Then it basically goes and bundles them all. For every single entity, it goes and generates an update message containing all of its components and all of its attributes. So this is why this is inefficient. It's really, even if something's never changed, it will always just send it through. That's not ideal. So this is the code that's going to change. The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fetch all of the entities that could be in range. I'm not going to worry about whether they're static or not. So let's just go const entities is going to be equal to await entity client dot query. We do need to search within the player's vicinity, so we'll continue doing that. So now we have a copy of all of the entities. So now what we want to do is we want to ask which entities have changed since the last message that the client has acknowledged. Now to do that, we need a copy of one of these client game state messages. Where are we going to, where are they? Client game state messages, objects. Where are we going to store that? Well, that's up to us. We could store it alongside the session, but that seems a bit inefficient because other services are going to need to pull back basic session information a fair bit. And this client state is only really relevant to the UDP transmitter. So what we probably want is we want the UDP transmitter to have its own Redis instance where it can go and just push these client state objects into it, pull them back out whenever it needs. Does it already have one? That's my first question. Docker compose. No, that's not what I wanted. Docker, my Docker compose file. There it is. Docker compose will find our UDP transmitter. There it is. And I've not defined a persistence service or a caching service here. So let's do a UDP TX. We'll just call it a cache. Similar to how a session has a session cache. This is going to have a Redis service. And we need a way of accessing, well, we need to tell the UDP transmitter how to contact its UDP transmitter. Now that's pretty easy because the name of the server should also be normally the IP address that we can connect to it on. So Docker creates a sort of a DNS proxy thing that lets us just connect to other services by their name. Now, the only problem is I've had to create the UDP transmitter service in a slightly different mode where it doesn't get its own IP address. It actually runs on my host's IP address. I've got an option here. I can either work out what was wrong that was causing me to have to do that, or I can just go and map this port to somewhere else. So let's do that. Just map the port. I think we just go ports. And we'll just map the Redis port. I can't remember what the default Redis port is. Let's just pull a browser across. Redis default port. There we go, 6379. So we'll just go and map 6379 to some other port number. I don't know, I'll just go 15600. It doesn't really matter what it is. Just as long as it's not in use. All right. So now we should be able to access this particular Redis instance on this port of localhost. Let's try that. Do I have a Redis CLI? Yes. How do I connect to one? Server URI. There we go. So, what does the server URI look like? Fair question. I'll just copy one from the sessions service. So it looks something like this, but I'm going to be going to Redis CLI, Redis localhost 15600. Now this won't work. Hello to Hrafnical. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to do a good job of pronouncing your name. It appears to use an alphabet I'm not familiar with. Is it connected to Wake World on Steam? No, I don't believe so. I'm not sure what Wake World is. This is just a custom MMO that I've been working on for a few months now. Not available to the public yet. Icelandic. Well, a lot of the game mechanics that I'm using are actually quite heavily inspired by an Icelandic game, which is EVE Online. I believe that's Icelandic. Okay, so we can't connect. Why not? Oh, because I need to do a minus URL or something, wasn't it? Bugs for that. Minus U. Okay, couldn't connect. That's fine, because I haven't started it up yet. Okay, so what do I need to do? Well, if I just do a docker compose start, that'll bring up, nope. Oh, I'm in the wrong directory. Let's just get into the right directory. Services. Docker compose, I'll do a build. That'll just make sure I have all my images down. And then stop. Start. That should just bring up the entire server stack. Now, when we run Redis, we still can't connect. That's a bit of a shame. And I can't actually see it attempting to start it. So, what am I doing wrong here? I really don't know. This will just take me a moment to debug and work out what I'm doing wrong. So the issue here, it's trying to bring up the UDP transmitter. I think I've just got my ports around the wrong way. That would be nice. Let's just try that. Sorry, let's do a start on that. There we go. It started the UDP transmitter cache. And now when we try to connect, there we go. We've got a connection to our new Redis server. It's perfect. Yeah, a random guy. At some point, well, my stuff tends to be randomly generated. I also need to work on some concept of level design. I do plan to have some handcrafted things like, equivalent of dungeons or cave systems, things like that, that I don't necessarily want completely randomly generated because they'll probably not make sense. So I'll also have to do some level design at some point. All right. Where am I at? I need my UDP transmitter service to know how to contact Redis. Just going to be control tabbing around a bit here just to see what I normally do. Let's do that. But the URL is Redis localhost. I think, how do you connect back out to the... yes, because my UDP transmitter service runs as... What did I call it? 600. It runs on the host, so we do connect to localhost 15600. Now, my Redis store is really simple. Redis is, at its core, a key value store. So you just store a piece of data against a key. Now, I want to store a particularly large piece of data, which is this client state, against just the session ID. So I'm going to assume that value is stored. I'm then going to pull out, well, try and pull out the actual client state. What's it going to look like? Const client state is going to be equal to, I'm going to control tab around again here just to make sure I'm consistent with the way the sessions controller does things. I probably define a service in here. Yeah, I've got a Redis service here. I'm going to cheat and just copy and paste this code and just adapt it to the new needs. Already have, nope, not session. I want UDP transmitter. Source, paste into there. So yes, we initialize it, we grab the config, handle connections, handle errors. All right, this should definitely go off into a common place of some sort. Not sure what that will be. Congratulations, a random guy. Always nice knocking over a bug. I knocked over a few yesterday. I was pretty happy with yesterday's stream. All right. So then what do I normally do? Back to my sessions controller. When we fetch a session, because that's closest to what we are doing here, fetch all, fetch, it's going to do something like this. So let's just grab that. And let's do a service called client state. Oh, I don't know, client state service or something. No, not a Java class. What's this doing? Why is it doing a Java class? I must have my project badly configured. Client state service. This is going to have a fetch. It's going to take a session ID. And it is going to do, needs to be async. Sorry, just my OBS window just popped onto the screen. So I'm just trying to adjust things around a little, give myself a better view over there. There we go. Okay, so we do an hget. I can't remember anything about Redis, so I am going to have to look up. I think that gets something out of a dictionary. Hash stored at key. Does that sound fair? I think that sounds fair. Clients, comma, session ID. Let's just do this. Hang on. Clients prefix, comma, session ID, and then let's define this. Find it at the top. Once that is going to be, let's make it clients. All right. So this is able to grab an object out of the client's hash from Redis with the key session ID. It pulls back a string, which we'll call state, and it will just return it. So whatever is stored in there will just come straight back to us. Okay, so client state is going to be equal to, well, we need access to a state client, so state service, the new client game state. And then client state is going to be the state service dot fetch. That's not meant to be a client game state. That is meant to be a client state service. The fact it's not filling out means this is not exported. There we go. Dot fetch. We need the session ID. Okay. So I'm expecting that to return nothing. This should be like undefined or something like that. So let's make this a fetch or create. So we want to always get a valid client state back, no matter what. Welcome back. I presume that's Mystery, is that pronounced? I believe you've been in before. Welcome back. Doing very well here. Implementing the new netcode that I was working on yesterday. Integrating the new netcode. Okay. So, fetch or create, I need to rename that method to fetch or create. And this needs to have a create new state method. Good to hear, Mystery. Private create new state. This does need to know the session ID, I presume. What do we store in the state object? Client game state. No, it doesn't. It doesn't know the session ID, which is fine. So all this needs to do is, well, I don't even need a function for that. I'm just going to do a new. All right, so this will always return a valid client game state, even if it's empty, which is fine, because when a player first joins, we do expect them to have an empty state. We go off, we grab the entities. Then we're going to generate deltas for each of the entities. Now, this is the tricky bit, because we need to handle 3 different cases here. We need to handle cases where entities exist, but the client doesn't know about them. We need to handle cases where they exist in both, and we need to handle cases where they don't they don't exist and the client thinks they do. So that means they've been removed. So we shouldn't be calling generate delta directly. This client game state needs a method. Well, here we go. We've got this generate message function that takes a list of entities. Let's use that. So we're going to do the client state dot generate message. Why is that not auto-completing? Yeah, I see. This it just doesn't know that this is definitely a client game state. There we go. And type of an async function must be a promise. Yep, that is fair enough. So this has to be an await, otherwise client state is a promise. Generate message. Okay, and then it wants a list of entities. Well, we can easily give it a list of entities. And that passes back delta. It's a server message that describes the delta. Now, at this point, this will have deltas for all of the entities within range. So this is going to be hundreds upon hundreds of trees, potentially thousands of stones. So this packet is going to be too big. But let's at least make sure that this works. I am going to go and destroy all of this code. Chunk invalidations is the only one I'm not sure about. But I can easily bring that code back. So let's get rid of all of that. And then we're just going to return the delta. So this method here, generate message, it does exactly what you think it'll do. It goes off and tries to find all the things that have been created, that have been deleted, and that have been modified. It doesn't quite do that correctly looking at this code, but we'll be able to fix that up. And then it generates the diff. Where does the diff happen? Here's the actual diff in here. Okay. Yeah, this code definitely doesn't do what I want. It doesn't handle those 3 different cases. So I am going to have to fix this. The other thing it needs to do is it needs to update its internal state. So it's not doing that either. Because it needs to know that it's sending out this message and be able to reference that later. When someone acknowledges it, it needs to know about this message. So let's just see if it's able to generate the diff first. I don't have very high hopes. Well, I mean, maybe. Okay, is that... Oh, I didn't actually run it. Sorry. Get ourselves a breakpoint in here. We'll try and find a Unity window. That's not a good sign. What's gone wrong here? Ah. So the other thing I'll just mention on stream, um, uh, JetBrains, of course, yesterday gave us some licenses to Rider, this editor here, to give away. And I'm trying to work out how to do it. And I think that what I might do is invite people to kind of post something they're working on. So I'll give them to people who are actually working on a game. That's kind of the reason for the poll. If anyone saw it, I was trying to gauge how many people in the audience are working on games. And so I might actually get people to just kind of post stuff on the very, very, very quiet subreddit I've got over on Reddit, and might just pick 3 winners out of that, and those 3 people will get a 1-year license for Rider. It's a beautiful editor. Don't know what people think of that. I don't understand what's happening here. In here, server manager. Just saying that I want to give away the licenses that JetBrains gave us yesterday. They gave us 3 licenses to give away. And because I want to give them to people who are going to use them, I thought I'd focus on giving them to people who are actively developing a game. And I thought the best way of doing that was to get people to create a post in my subreddit over on reddit.com, and just show off what they're doing. It doesn't have to be advanced. And I'll just choose 3 people from those who post on the subreddit with their progress. Maybe a screenshot, something like that. Only if people are willing to share. And then, yeah, so the 3 people I choose will get a license from JetBrains for Rider, this editor here. Welcome back, Oslath. So I don't know what's going wrong in here. We seem to be getting data back. I mean, is this coming out of UDP? I assume so. I really don't understand what this error is. I'm double clicking on things. So it's trying to get from UUID. Where's that UUID coming from? From UUID. I'm confused. How's it getting in here? It's doing a... Oh, this looks wrong. if session is not defined. Okay, so we do have a valid session. What have I done? Just get a breakpoint on there. I really wasn't expecting the client to crash. So session details. We do have an entity ID. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. That's 24. Oh. Oh, I've not tested my client since I got my unit tests passing. This is an issue. I'll just show what this is. In the entity controller, anyone that's been in a lot will probably remember I had this toDTO method, and that called off into this horrible sequence of methods that I wrote to go off and flatten what comes out of Mongo. And in the end, I'm just like, well, Mongo already has a function for this, which is either toObject or toJSON, depending on what you're doing. But the other thing I was doing in my flattening code was converting string IDs, converting Mongo IDs to be UUIDs, as in like, the alpha, hexadecimal with hyphens all through them. But it doesn't do that. So what I need to do here is handle the case where there are no hyphens. So this part will do nothing if there are no hyphens. But what the issue is that the Mongo IDs are only 12 bytes long. 12 bytes long, whereas a UUID is 16. So I kind of need to prefix it with some zeros. So we pull the bytes out. That's fine. So at this point, if I put a breakpoint here, I'm going to guess that bytes is going to be a 12 byte. Yep, bytes is 12 bytes long. So I need to what do I need to do? Prefix it somehow. Easiest way to do that is just, there'll be a Stack Overflow question, C# prefix byte array with 0 padding. That's not quite what I want, but it might have it. Yep, this is exactly what I want. Array.copy. This is perfect. So let's do raw bytes. And then in here, I'm going to have a var bytes, which is going to be exactly 16. And then array.copy. I'll just quickly check if they do anything special for the 0 padding. No. So we're going to copy. The source array is going to be the raw bytes. The destination array is going to be bytes. The destination index, what's the difference between these two? Not null array, destination array. Oh, that they're identical except one's int, one's long. So the destination index is going to be raw bytes dot length, maybe 16 minus that. So if we do get 16 bytes back, it'll do it at location 0. If we get 12 bytes back, it'll do it at location 4. And then we're going to copy across raw bytes dot length. I do need to make sure that we never get something that's too long. So in here, if raw bytes length is greater than 16, let's do out of bounds. No, do an argument exception. No, understood, a random guy. I mean, a piece of general advice, and this is more business advice than anything. A mistake I used to make is I was always kept everything very close to my chest. I was always concerned that, if people saw your ideas, then they'd potentially be able to steal your ideas. But it turns out that an idea is worth, after many years in business, an idea is worth almost nothing. It's the execution of ideas that matters. So people have asked me, for example, will I make my source code open source? And my answer is no, I have no intentions to make my code open source, but I'm also happy to show my code on stream. I'm not giving anyone permission to use this code, but people can't just go and look at the code here and copy it. When you talk about ideas, you do get more feedback on them. It's obviously going to vary from project to project and a lot on your circumstances. But I, in the past, have always been too paranoid about people stealing ideas. In business, when talking to investors, for example, some people will say, oh, I don't want to talk to prospective investors until, they've signed NDAs and stuff. And well, investors are never going to sign NDAs for startups. And so business people, entrepreneurs miss out on potential investment because they don't want investors stealing their ideas, whereas it turns out that investors have no interest in stealing ideas. Because until they can see the idea work, they don't want to put effort into, stealing it. Stealing something takes a lot of effort. Bytes is longer than a byte array cannot decode UUID longer than 16 bytes. But as I said, it does vary on circumstances, but as a general rule, sharing, I think, only gives you better feedback. Raw bytes doesn't exist in this context. Yes, it does. What? Raw bytes definitely exists. I must have a missing brace or something. If anyone can see what I'm doing wrong here, I would be... The compiler is telling me... Oh. Okay, no, this is... I believe what's happened here is because I'm actually running the code, this is looking at an old version of the bytecode. So at this point in the code, normally raw bytes had gone... Well, raw bytes didn't exist before. So I think I just need to get the code to die. And then if we come back, go. No, I need to tell it to stop. Stop. Did I just press? What was that? Press Unity assets. Okay, just stop. Stop, stop, stop. I also can't remember a random guy. I think was it you that was doing an episodic game? I can understand wanting to keep a lot of stuff secret if you're doing something episodic, because a lot of the value of a game could be in the twists and turns along the way. Um, yeah, that does make a big difference, a random guy. That said, you can, um, potentially show people some really early stuff in it, like early in the game, because that's not going to give away stuff that people wouldn't see straight away anyway. And it can be good to get feedback on, I don't know, graphic style and things like that. Where am I at? Sorry, I'm distracting myself. I'd love to know why Twitch didn't connect properly today. It's a little bit annoying. I could see while I was starting my stream that something wasn't quite right. Um, um, okay, is this working? It's compiled. Play that. All compiler errors have to be fixed. Yeah, that's fair enough. It's still breaking. Okay. Cannot resolve. Is a byte array not the same as a system array? Uh, I want this one, right? System array. Oh no, I've missed a parameter. So I've got array, source array is raw bytes, and then the source index should be 0. There we go, that's happier. Let that recompile. That looks better. Hopefully this can boot up. Not looking happy. Still failing there. Oh, yeah, that's just dumb. This is meant to be bytes again. I should be more explicit. Let's make that padded bytes. This isn't what I wanted to be working on this stream. I wanted to be doing fun integration stuff. Okay. So this is now failing because we've got a problem with a hash. So this sounds like a server-side bug. Let's just see what we're getting. So what this does is it goes and calculates the hash for the packet. Ignore that. No, this line is not right. No, so we calculate, yeah, here it is. We calculate the hash for the packet. And we pull the hash out of the message. So we ask what the server thought the hash was. We calculate our own hash. Well, we've calculated a hash of 0. That is a bit telling. And payload bytes is 0. That's definitely not right. Let's just shut that down and go look at the server code where we generate the datagram. I have a feeling this is going to be pretty obvious. Here we return the delta. Oh, we're getting An actual compile error? No, it's an undefined somewhere. And here it is, line 65 of generate delta. Line 65. I think the problem here is that attributes could be null, or it could be undefined. So let's just do that. Yeah, having your friend play it, that's a good strategy there, random guy. Okay, let's run this. I have no idea if we are running properly. Still not looking right. Oh, it's looking a lot better though. All right. Let's take a look at what is being sent. Got no errors here. My guess is that my UDP transmitter service crashed when I tried to recompile it. This is that bug that we've been seeing a bit. It's not my bug. JetBrains asked that I send the details of that through to them, which I keep on meaning to do. Oh, they asked for a video as well. I could always just send them a piece of the stream, given how often I hit it. All right, what does a packet look like? It's not all that big. I'm surprised at how small that is, but we've had 25 deltas come in. All right, well, we're not getting any terrain coming in. Oof. And we've got, it looks like a single chunk of, what on earth is happening down there? A single chunk of terrain, of scatter. Now that's a bit weird. That suggests that the terrain service is never sending through the terrain, but I've not changed anything in there. Now, the reason we'd be getting only a single chunk of scatter would be because the client isn't requesting any terrain. So that's kind of what I expect. That scatter only gets generated when somebody generates, like requests a chunk. And so if no one's ever requested terrain, then there'll be no stones to send through. The fact that we have scatter on the origin chunk suggests that we have requested that particular chunk. So what is in our terrain service? Let's see if we can find the actual database. Docker Compose Services, we've got the terrain persist store. Can we get an IP address or something for it? Don't know how. Docker get IP address of container. Container name or ID with that. Let's do that. Need a Docker PS. Docker Compose PS. And then we do that and the terrain persist service. There it is. So now we should be able to connect to that database through IntelliJ. What do we have to? Another Mongo database. Create a Mongo database. Connect to, there's no auth. URL is going to be that. Test the connection. Yep, that worked. Chunks. Here we go. That all looks pretty valid, right? These look like massive structures. Yeah, so this is a 800 and something line. This is just all the various height map data. Oh, it's only got the height map data? Where's our mesh? Hmm. I'm going to just blow everything away. I'm not sure what state things are in. Let's remove the database. Bring it back up again. So my concern is that this, in the terrain database, it stored all the height map data for that single chunk, but it's not stored the mesh. And I'd very much expect it to have a mesh, given the client can't render it without the mesh. So that means the client is never requesting that mesh. Here we go. Ah, all right. Anyone who was in yesterday's stream will know that I got annoyed with calling things UV instead of chunk and QR instead of hex, but I never updated that on the client. So the terrain service, oh, in fact, it's the terrain. Yeah, so the terrain service is crashing while trying to return stuff. well, while trying to serialize stuff. Okay. Let's just go have a look. Terrain controller. That's called the chunk controller. Oh, I'm running low on memory. That really shouldn't happen on this machine. um, I don't know what's using my memory. I'm gonna have a look at that in a second because this machine has like 64 gig of RAM or something stupid. So I very much doubt that anything's been able to run out of memory. Okay. So the chunk controller is here, and this will be calling off into the Mongo service. And that's called coord. So I'd say when I'm storing the chunk model, I'm calling it something other than coord. Let's see, chunk model gets used by chunks controller all over the place. I have a .uv somewhere in here. Yep, there it is. That should be coord.u, coord.v, coord.w. All right. Definitely going to blow the database away again. I have no idea what state it'll be in after that. This all looks healthy. Run the game again. There we go. We are back to having terrain. Now, I'm a little bit surprised that we've got any scatter at all coming in, because I've just overridden the changes I made a few days ago where I stopped sending through so much traffic over UDP, and I assume it's because we're just getting this this single chunk's worth. No, this is more than a chunk's worth. What if we run over here? Do we get some more? Run a bit of a distance away. No, it's not generating more scatter. So at this point, I'd say it's trying to send too many entities. We must have just gotten lucky where it sent through some entities while it was generating the scatter, and so it wasn't overflowing our UDP packets. But this is good because this scatter that you can see here was generated by the new code. So this is awesome. Big progress. So the next thing I want to do is decide when there are too many entities changing in a chunk and collapse them again into one of those chunk invalidation events. The best way to do that is going to be in the... Oh, something's really slow here. Hold on a second. I'm going to restart my IntelliJ. I'll just check if I've got anything using ridiculous amounts of memory first. Nothing's using much memory. Okay, I think the issue here with the memory and the slow performance, so the JetBrains products are built on top of Java, and one of the limitations of Java is it has to be given a cap on the amount of memory that it can use. Just to show, I don't think I've got anything sensitive on the screen over here. No, so there's just the resources from my machine at the moment. You can see I've got about 64 gig of RAM. I'm using 34 gig. It's normal for an operating system to go and chew up a bunch that it doesn't need. As you can see here, we've got 16, 17 gig of cache. So most likely, I can safely go to processors. You can see Java, which is going to be IntelliJ, is only using 4 gigabytes, but it's getting all slow. I do have a pretty large project loaded up in it, like it's got a lot of moving parts in it. .NET is Rider. I don't know what this Java is. Oh, sorry, .NET will be Unity, and this will be Rider. So I probably just need to tell IntelliJ that it's allowed to use a bit more memory. So I'll just see if I can find, can't find that out of memory. Oh, analyze memory use. Low on memory. Please consider increasing available heap. Maximum heap size. Oh, I can give it more than that. Let's just give it like 8 gig. Yeah, I'm fortunate to have a bit of a beast of a machine here, so it's pretty easy for me to just go and throw 8 gig at a process. Close that. All right, so hopefully that'll fix my performance issues. All right, where was I? I needed to go into my client. Oh, this is much better. Client game state. And so here is the bit where I generate all these messages. Now I've got to decide if I will put them into, convert the messages in here, or if it'll be the code that calls into this that determines when things should be collapsed into a chunk invalidation. So for anyone new, the way this works, the way the chunk invalidations work is if I decide there are too many entities being updated in a chunk to send out over UDP, then I just remove those messages, don't send them through to the client, and instead send them a little tiny message saying, there are a whole bunch of updates in this chunk. Can you go and fetch them through HTTP? I think I'll put the code in here. I need to be a bit, because otherwise I'm going to be generating these big server messages with these big entity updates, and I need to pull them apart again. And unless this class knows about what's been collapsed into a chunk invalidation, then I'm just going to keep on generating entities, only to remove them again. Now, I keep on saying don't prematurely optimize your code. It's a good piece of advice that you'll often see in IT. But there's also another one, which is don't prematurely pessimize your code, which is don't make it slow just for the sake of making it slow. If there's a simple way of making it faster, then might as well do it. As long as it doesn't increase the complexity of your code. Okay. So here are my entity updates. Welcome back, Griffic. I'm just sitting on my soapbox uh, about working on performance issues and trying to rationalize solving a performance issue before it's actually come up. What I'm also working on is I've got the new diff code actually working and passing entities through to the client, but it is not collapsing the big entity updates. Like where there are lots of entities updating, it's not collapsing them into chunk invalidations anymore. So what I want to do here is, well, first of all, in here I need to fix this to do because, oh no, this is exactly the right to do. This is currently just generating deltas for generating deltas for all the entities that the server knows about and assuming the client knows nothing. So in here, I'd need another to do look up the client state of this entity. I got here, something's not right. There we go. Yes, and on the topic of performance, the reason I'm going with the more performant option here is the code will be no more or less complicated. I have to put this optimization in somewhere, and putting it in at this inner level will be more performant, whereas putting it at the outer level will be less performant. The complexity is identical between them, so I might as well go for the more performant option. So, yeah, consider collapsing entity updates into chunk invalidations. First thing I need to do is take these entity updates and index them by chunk. So let's go updates by chunk is going to be the entity updates dot reduce result, comma, update. And then I don't know, this is just going to be an entity array, I guess. Const key is going to be equal to update dot location reward. Knowing me, I stopped talking mid-sentence too. I have a nasty habit of doing that when I'm deep in thought. Chunk key. So, okay, we grab that to chunk key. Let's just make this handle undefined. It's going to simplify my code a bit. What? To chunk key is expecting a chunk coordinate or an undefined. Oh, location dot coordinate dot chunk. Still not happy? I've got this new type called a chunk like, don't I? Chunk like object. Which means it doesn't need to be my rich type. I'm not using any methods on it. So a chunk like object is just something that has a U and a V. chunk key. I have no idea how we could end up with not chunk key here, but if we do end up with it, we're just going to return result. We can get rid of... Oh, what's this? Hang on. No, I'm not in the piece of code. I thought I was. Let's not just start writing random code like that. Okay. No, better than that is just to go chunk key equals that. If not chunk key, and return. There we go. What have I just pressed? Almost there. Okay. Where's the code I was actually working on? That must be in here. Yep. Um, Hotkey, return result. Oh, I keep on doing that. I've really got to disable that shortcut. I've got a little key up near my escape key, and I keep on accidentally hitting it. Nope, that shouldn't be that. That should be looked up. Is that right? So we're pulling out an update. We're grabbing its chunk key. We're going to return the result with the key updated to be the existing one if it exists, otherwise an empty list, followed by this update. I think that's good. Except this shouldn't be entity. This should be an entity update. Excellent. No syntax errors. That's a good start. It's by chunk. Okay. Um, that's actually yeah, talking about art style, it's one of the concerns I have with me going with low poly. Um, Something I like about games like Minecraft, kind of a bit of a counterexample here, but I really like the fact that people are able to um, kind of express themselves artistically using Minecraft. Um, Once you combine it with hyperrealism, it unless there's if you've got low poly and hyperrealism, you potentially really restrict people in how they can express themselves. Whereas having sort of higher definition textures and meshes models, uh, I think will let people express themselves more. So it's one of the reasons I'm reluctant to go with low poly is because of the building system and wanting it to be um, a bit more immersive. Uh, and I'm not sure how a low poly style will be able to support that. But I am low poly for now and sticking with it until I have a reason not to. .values.that.entries. No, object.entries. What am I doing? I'm so distracted at the moment. And it's not your fault in chat. It's just me being distracted. Okay, chunk key. This is a bit annoying. What I need to do in here is once there's more than some threshold of items, I mean, there's got to be a better way of doing it than that because it depends on how big the items are as well. Once there's beyond a certain threshold of items, I no longer want to send them through as individual updates. Now that means I need to remove them from this array up here. I think a better way of doing this is actually to generate two indexes. And I'm just going to define this inline up here. I think I can do types inline. I'm just going to make some entity index and it's going to have a by ID. And a by chunk. Sorry, I'm a bit behind on chat. Yeah, 8,000 unique entities is pretty significant. Yeah, I quite like the idea of procedural mesh generation. Uh, and I've thought about it for my stuff. For, the one of the first crafting recipes is your stone hand axe. And I think it'd be kind of cool if hand axes were kind of unique, like they would be in real life, right? They'd have bits chipped off them, and I think it'd be kind of cool if things like that were unique. And then depending on what kind of stone you make them out of would slightly change the parameters of it. And so I'm tempted to experiment with procedural mesh generation for procedural model generation for items. I think it could be quite cool. It could mean a lot of data getting passed around is the only thing. Oh yeah, and if you're moddable, that makes things, yeah, yeah. Okay, so by chunk is going to be one of those. Doesn't like by chunk, why not? By chunk is that. What have I done? Do I need to do this in interface? I don't think so. By ID is going to be one of those. Oh, I'm missing a brace. Always a missing brace. So then this can return an entity index. Update is an entity index. We come in with a new entity, and then I'm going to do my actual sorting in here. So if we don't get an update, then we just return the index as it is. Otherwise, I need to return the updated index, which is going to be the updates. With an ID. Let's go update dot. I need to pull the actual. Oh, we can just go entity.id. Nice. Gets the update. By ID. And then I also need the by chunk. Updates dot. Um, yeah, it makes life so much easier, the destructuring. Well, except I'm having troubles with the syntax here a bit, but so this is the case where we do have a valid update, so we can update by ID really easily. That is just, that is it there. And then by chunk, we need to grab the chunk key, which is const chunk key is going to be equal to chunk key. Location.coord.chunk. Yeah, if I do create too much garbage, then I'll optimize that if and when I come across it. I think it should be pretty obvious if it does happen. My big coffee cup is in the dishwasher at the moment, so I'm having to go straight from the French press. There we go. Fresh coffee. Okay, so we've got by ID. By chunk is going to be ... updates by chunk. Well, here I've got to be careful. I've got to actually look up my chunk index for entity, which is going to be the updates dot by chunk. By chunk for the chunk key, or just an empty list. Does not exist on entity. Oh, this is just, yeah, I don't have the right types yet. Index for entity dot length is greater than, let's just do max entities per chunk. And I'm just going to set that to be 5 or something really little like that. I just want to see this code actually work. We can go a bit more. No, we'll leave it. Private that colon number equals that. Okay, so if we have too many entities in there, greater than or equal to, because we're about to put this in, then chunk index for entity, we're just going to empty it out. Otherwise, I'm going to push effectively, just using destructuring, the new one in. And that means I'm going to need a third parameter here, which is going to be invalidated chunks. Node can't find your exported class. Yeah, I don't know. It can be a bit annoying. I'm obviously very multi-module here, and I had to kind of really jump through hoops to get it to be able to find stuff across modules. And I'm not actually sure that I'm doing it properly in my stuff. I've got a feeling that even though it's multi-module, it's actually just loading stuff in kind of inline. I think it's just finding the files in the right spot. I had to enable all sorts of experimental options to get it to work. Yeah, the module loading stuff in Node could really do to settle down a bit. Seems like every 2 versions of ECMA, they go and invent a new module system, which is very frustrating. Type undefined. Um, oops, that's not right. I want that. This isn't quite right. Okay, if it can't find the chunk, then I still want to add it to the by ID. I don't want to add it to the chunk index. So what I can do in here is I can just do a let entities in same chunk in chunk. If chunk key then entities in chunk is going to be equal to updates by chunk key. Yeah, Griffith, that one's really annoying with, I think that's I can never remember what it is that causes that. I think it's TypeScript that requires that, isn't it? In normal Node, you can do imports from non-modules, but in TypeScript, you need to be a module in order to use import. Otherwise, you have to use require. Very annoying. Oh, I thought it was only TypeScript. Interesting. Probably depends on which ECMA you're using. Okay, so trying to get the by chunk. If the chunk key is defined, then grab the current entities. If there aren't any, start with an empty list. In fact, I can just go ... all of that and the update. So that gives me the entities in this current chunk. Now we can do if we have too many entities. Then entities in chunk is going to get emptied out. Just one moment. I just need to very quickly take a phone call. I'll be less than 5 minutes. And I'm back. Sorry about that. Just had to quickly take that phone call. It wasn't meant to say that I was starting soon. It was meant to say that the stream was paused. I pressed the wrong button. Okay. So if the chunk key is defined, then I am going to make that a const. If there are too many, then by chunk is going to be equal to updates by chunk. Key. So in this case, we have too many things. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm able to change the order of those messages, Griffic. Appearance. Oh no, that's not even the... Not liking this. Okay, I'm about to end up doing this here. Sorry, I'm getting all sorts of messages. It's just a real estate agent. I don't want to buy a house. Any idea how expensive those things are? Okay, so I'm going to stop this from generating updates. We've got this invalidated chunks. So if updates.invalidated chunks, name this whole thing to index, index.invalidated chunks.has, oops, what did I just press? I'm jumping all over the place here. I can't decide what I want this code to look like. So what I'm actually trying to do, I'm trying to get it to handle the case where I already have issued a chunk invalidation. Then I don't want it to generate a new, I don't want it to consider putting this chunk delta, this delta anywhere. Now the simplest thing for me to do would be to handle the case of, to either ignore updates that for entities that don't have a chunk. That's a bit annoying because that wouldn't let me update things in the inventory, which is a limitation I'm not willing to accept. So I then need to work out how I'm going to handle it. So I need to put them, I just need to not put them into the by chunk index because they're going to have to get sent through and I can't issue a chunk invalidation for them. So, sorry, just not making much sense here, but thinking out loud. If we have a chunk key, I'm actually storing them, Graphic, in these changes I'm making at the moment. These are actually going into Redis. Now, there could potentially be benefit at small scales for with including like just an in-memory caching layer in front of that. But that doesn't scale obviously because as you move from a single instance of the UDP transmitter to multiple instances, the chances of getting a hit get reduced. So it's not something I think is worth doing unless you absolutely have to. That said, it can be beneficial to do stuff like that if you're able to try and make sessions tend to stick with the one service, and then it might be worth it, but obviously not worth even considering stuff like that until it's known that it's an issue. All right. I'm just going to go through each of these cases. And in fact, if I move this all into I don't even need to move it into a function. Once I return out of here, I'm inside the reduce here, right? So I can just return a new value of the index and this will do exactly what I want as long as I cover each of the cases. Okay. So if I do have an invalidated chunk for this, then I have nothing to do. In fact, I'm going to make this do a little performance improvement here, which is before we even generate the diff, if we have a chunk key and that chunk has been invalidated, then we have absolutely nothing to do. So we can just return the index because we've already invalidated that chunk. No point in generating another diff. So that's the easy case. The cache does get cleared, Griffic. But that is fine. As long as it's not in like a cascading failure, it should be fine. Because the server will come up, it will see a client that it doesn't know. The client will have an established session potentially because the server might just be in like a failure state and just coming up. But it will come up with an empty state, and it will actually cause it to regenerate the state with the client. So it'll send through too many state updates to the client, but they'll both quickly come back into sync, and so that should be fine. In the event it gets into a cascading failure case where the act of a service coming up puts too much load on another part of the system and causes it to fall over again, then that wouldn't be ideal. So at that point, I need to make sure that it's able to terminate sessions so that the client will reestablish a session. And yeah, I'll deal with that when I come to it. Space vines. I like it. Manta rays. Okay, clowns. And sorry, I missed a chat from Twitch. Ivan Bormata. Tips for game devs. My biggest tip is start with something really small, even just a clone of an existing game, like um, just remake Pac-Man um, uh, or Flappy Bird or something like that, just to get into the practice of making something that you know is fun to play, and so you don't need to get caught up in making sure that your game mechanics make sense. Apologies, I missed that earlier. I don't know how long that. I don't have timestamps on my Twitch messages at the moment, so I can't tell how long ago that was. No, the Twitch messages for some reason I'm not seeing them either in my restream chat view. I have no idea what went wrong. Restream apparently never even attempted to connect to Twitch this morning. The stream is going out, but the chat isn't. Uh, and no, I don't believe it's anything to do with the bot being banned. Yeah. Okay, so where was I? Um, Sorry, I'm really distracted today, aren't I? So here we generate the delta. So what I actually want to do here is look up the uh, look up the original version of the entity. So to do that, I really need to find the client state for which we need to know the chunk that it's in. So that's fine. So this whole thing needs to come up into an if chunk key. If chunk key It's possible my bot got banned from Twitter. That would lead to this behavior, because then it wouldn't be able to see the chat on Twitter. It's definitely working on YouTube because I'm seeing the YouTube messages and they come in through the, well, they come in through the API. So if chunk key, and then, where's this gone? If chunk key, and then if that, and return that. Look up the client version. Oops. I'm having a shocker today. There we go. Look up the client version of the entity. This dot client state chunk key mark dot entity dot ID. Const client entity is going to be equal to that. Nice. So now I can do that. Except if we don't know our... Okay, I might just need to call out to this generate in a few different places, which is fine. The entity generate the diff. Let update, const update is going to be equal to that. No, sorry. Let client entity be undefined. Well, it's going to be undefined by default. Set the client entity here. Now we can generate the update. If nothing has changed, then just return the index. Okay. Okay. It's going through this again. If we have a chunk key, we check if it's already been invalidated, and we look up what the entity already was. Regardless, we generate the update. If nothing's changed, just return, nothing to do. Otherwise, we need to work out if the chunk has gotten too big. To do that, we need to come back into chunk key, if chunk key. We need to get the entities in chunk. Which is just this. If the entities in chunk are too big, set is terrible here because I need an immutable type to use reduce properly. I just need to check how node behaves with undefined members, just to see if I can use a dummy like x equals a colon undefined. What does that? Oops. What does that do? Yeah. A in x. Oh, yeah. What on earth? How is this not valid? And x is true. Excellent. So I'm just going to use a void, an undefined in here. Totally abusing object notation. I presume this is more performant than using a list. Ah, well, let's not do premature optimization. We're not going to get that many chunks. This is actually just going to be a string. Invalidated chunks. Yeah, I got there eventually, Griffic. Sorry, there's a bit of lag there. And yeah, I figured it's not worth worrying about the performance here anyway. We're never going to have more than a few chunks in here. If it becomes an issue, then I'll worry about it then. So this shouldn't be invalidated chunks.has. Oh, this code's going to get uglier. It's really not my day for development, is it? I am going to do it the dodgy way then. That is faster and it's just a poor man's set, but supports immutability. So this is going to be chunk key in. If that is in there, then return index. Otherwise, entities in chunk is that. If it's too big, then we need to add it to the immutable, to the invalidation list. This is going to go by ID is going to be equal to index.byId entity.id update. So we do have to add it to that index. that code there is going to get reproduced a couple of times here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put that as const. By ID is going to be equal to if we have an update, then it's going to be index.byId, entity ID, update. Otherwise, it is just going to be indexed by ID because there's nothing to add to that index. So now I can just get rid of all of that because we've already calculated what our new by ID should be. I've got the by chunk. We'll use destructuring here to delete the items for the chunk. So let's go over. No, sorry, I need to pull out the. This isn't easy to pull out that chunk, is it? Huh. I want to use destructuring, but I'm not allowed to use that. Am I? Surely not. No, that can't possibly be right. I am just going to test it. I'm sure it's not right. X is equal to A colon 42, B colon 43. And then obviously I can do const A comma dot 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 other equals X, and X will just have the B in it, right? Oh, sorry, other will just have the B in it. Excellent. But I can't do... Ah, is that right, Graphic? So I can do const A colon ignore, comma, dot, 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 other, 2 equal to X, other 2. Nice. Do I even need the ignore? Can I do, what happens if I do that? No. Okay, cool. Are you serious? Chunk key colon, copy that out to get your braces. I don't quite understand it. Broadcast pause, that's not what I wanted. Oh, I can't copy out of chat. Are you serious? I really can't copy out of chat. Let's try it. You did a... 1 second. No, I don't think that... I can't imagine that would work. I think you're saying a colon and then a brace dot 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 other. I can't quite see it from the font if it's that or that you said, but I'm pretty sure you said the first. No, okay, so I'm just going to do it the first way. Colon, I'll just do an underscore. Keep chunks. Is going to be equal to index dot by chunk. Yeah, I'm actually transferring any entities that were being indexed by chunk, where the chunk's overflown. I'm just going to convert them into an invalidation message. So we've got the keep chunks. So by chunk will be equal to the keep chunks. And then lastly, we've got the, where's my type? Type says we've got the invalidated chunks. Index.invalidated chunks, comma. This needs to be an object. And then my dodginess, I will put the chunk key, which is defined, and I will just mark it as undefined, just for the sake of adding the key. Now, I could be a little bit less dodgy if I just made that boolean. That also has the added advantage that I don't need to use the in operator here. I can actually just do invalidated chunks, chunk key, and theoretically I could uninvalidate a chunk. Not that I'm going to do that, but this at least makes the code a bit more readable. It sort of looked like you know what you're talking about. Well, you got the right answer, so that's all that matters, right? All right. So this deletes a chunk from the chunk index, adds an invalidation to the list of invalidations. I believe we add an update if and only if it's valid. We know that we have an update. Since we know we have an update, I don't even need to do that. There we go. So we add that to the by ID index. If we have a chunk key and we've overflown it, then do that. Getting there. Otherwise, we've not overflown it. So we're going to return by ID by chunk key. Or an empty list. Oh no, I've already got this called entities in chunk, don't I? Entities in chunk. Nice. So now I can just pass it by chunk, and the invalidated chunks is the index.invalidated chunks, because we're not changing them. All right. That is almost all of the cases. So now we've only got the case left where we do not know which chunk it's in which case we can do nothing but add it to the list of entities by ID. No, we're just going to return, sorry, by ID we can just return the current index like that. This can be slightly simplified, maybe not quite as efficient, but it will look prettier. Do that. Wow, I have no idea if that's going to work. So there's my reduce. My reducer finishes here. I need to give it the initializer. It's going to have an empty by ID, an empty by chunk, and an empty validated chunks. If you're letting people run servers for your game locally, RAM-based Mongo database, or something that can start up a Redis database. Good question. It doesn't need to persist. Yeah, if you don't need the caches to persist, I imagine there are 1,000,001 just in-memory key value stores. Um, uh, so if you're really just using it as a key value store, I guess the question is why not just use just basically a dictionary if you don't need persistence. And unless you need the query side of it, I can't see really a huge benefit to using like Mongo or Redis. Yeah, not really sure. Not sure. You're hoping for some query syntax. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'd probably suggest just spinning up a MongoDB. I mean, you've got to be slightly careful because you don't want them, you want to make sure that it is in process. So you don't want your game to exit or crash and have them have a Mongo hanging around. Um, and I'm not really sure the best way to ensure that. Yeah, absolutely. If you want to use the advanced features of a database, then yeah, for sure. By the way, I did a little bit more research into these consoles, the question that JetBrains wasn't able to answer. And it's actually quite cool what you can do with these. I just need is a query. I need a console. It's a console. Um, not query console. So here's an example of some of the stuff you can do with this console. So yes, you've got the full. You can do aggregations and things. I mean, this is just using the native query stuff, but you can also do like db dot these dot aggregate. So you can do the aggregation stuff, but kind of cool. You can also just do it as SQL syntax, and internally it just goes and converts this into the relevant JavaScript. and Mongo, sorry, the relevant Mongo, which is pretty cool. So this one here, if I go and run this, it goes off. It's not going to return anything in this case. I hope my server's running. My server's not running, so this is never going to work. But it's kind of cool that you can do Mongo database syntax, or you can do SQL syntax, and it just works out which one it is and converts it. Yeah, for someone, if someone has not been able to learn the Mongo side of things and doesn't need to learn the Mongo side of things for some reason, but they're used to manipulating data, then it's a great way of giving them a really quick way of accessing data. Like, I don't know, yeah, I definitely prefer this syntax, obviously. I don't, I believe it will. For example, I know this isn't an aggregation, but in here I can do a $sign. Oh, I could. I was getting auto completion when I was doing this the other day. I think because I don't have a connection, it's not working. So I assume it would also work for aggregations. But yeah, it's a cool little tool, that one. So I am no longer using Compass. Yeah, hang on, I'll spin up the database again. There's no way this is going to start. So no, I can't demonstrate it at the moment. My code doesn't compile. Why would it come up? Okay, I'll get this working, and then I'll see if I can show the. Welcome back, a random guy. Okay, I think I stopped mid-sentence again. I stopped mid-thought, in fact. I have no idea what I'm doing. Consider collapsing entity updates into chunk invalidations. I'm pretty sure I'm already doing all of that. And this was... Okay, return that, including the update. Yep, I'm doing all of that elsewhere. Don't need to do any of that. However, I do now need to collapse all of these. I need to collapse this index into a flat list of updates. But that's really easy, because that really is just, where's my index? I've lost my index. This is meant to be index. Yeah, that's a bit dodgy, but I'm reusing the name index. I think it's safe enough in that context. So entity updates is really just the index dot by ID it's dot values on that, reduce result item catch you around, a random guy. Thank you for joining. To distract me, I believe the evil plan is. This is going to be... Is that right? Why am I doing a reduce? This is actually just a list of entity updates. And then in here, I can just do object.keys, index.invalidate chunks. chunk invalidations equals that dot, and I guess I need to map them to be chunk invalidation messages. So just chunk. This is a list of keys, right? So that's a chunk key. Huh. No, what I'm going to do, so I did make this a Boolean before. If I instead make this a proto.chunk invalidation, then what I can do is when I add a chunk invalidation, if I do that, if there are too many here, I need a chunk invalidation. What do they look like? It has a chunk coordinate. Oh, now I'm completely lost. Is a chunk coordinate. I guess is just entity.location.chunk, which I know is definitely defined. So sorry TypeScript, but I am going to override you. Bit confused where my chunk invalidation. No, it's this one is the chunk invalidation one. So it has a coordinate and an invalidation type. That is a chunk and an invalidation type. I am going to scrap worrying about that. Well, let's just set it to that. Just proto.chunk invalidation type.entities. I'm not going to worry about the distinction between static and non-static. Wish circular references weren't a problem in TypeScript. Yeah. That said, I'd argue that circular references are indicative of a design issue. And I know TypeScript is intrinsically lower. Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of boilerplate, so you're not normally expecting to have to define lots of interfaces and things like that all over the place. But a circular reference can normally be broken with an interface or a getter. And if it were a higher level, sorry, not a higher level, if it were a more verbose language, then you'd be expected to do that stuff anyway. What is this? I'm lost. Chunk invalidation as invalidation types. Okay. So, is that compiling? Nope. Oh, close. We no longer need to do the map because we can now just grab the values on that. On it, what? That is not what I was expecting. I was expecting an entity index to come out of this. Let's just make that explicit. Hopefully find out what's failing. Must be one of my returns. No. Okay, what does it think that is? It thinks, oh, this is easy. It's got that type right at least. Knows that's an entity. Hopefully I've got a little red squiggle somewhere in here. No. Entities know about the entity manager, which knows about definitions. It's about item. An item is a kind of entity. Yes. Yeah, so in that case, I suspect entity manager you could make catch around a random guy. Uh, See you tomorrow, hopefully. Um, yeah, in that chain you've described there, Griffic, it feels like an entity manager, which I presume is something that has like a lookup on it or something. Could be an interface. I guess you just got to think about why your entities need a reference to their manager. I presume they need to call methods on the manager. So I'd be looking at making the entity manager an interface with a single concrete implementation. And that, I believe, would break your... oh, maybe not, because it might return items. I see your problem. Yeah, that's a pain. So perhaps this entity that should be the interface. I believe that would work, making entity an interface. No, I see. Yeah, okay. That's a tough one. That's a genuine secular reference. Okay, so what am I doing wrong here? This is complaining type entity is not assignable to entity index. Well, yes, but why would... I've seen stuff like this happen where I've needed to explicitly specify the initial value as a, let's just do that as an init value. Um, Let's be absolutely in entity index, and this is an entity. This is returning the right type. This is returning the right type. Returns. Make sure that's an entity index. Make sure that's an entity index. There's another one as entity index. And this is where the problem is. Cool. What doesn't it like? Version of type is missing. Required in type coordinate is missing in type that. Coordinate. Wow, that was a very misleading error message, but there we go. There, get rid of that. Oh, no more compilers. I say ship it. All right. The funny thing is, after all of that, well, what am I expecting to have changed? I'm expecting to see a bunch of chunk invalidations come through now. In fact, I think that every chunk will be sending through a chunk invalidation. Let's try it out. stop the server, restart the server. I think this is running. Looks like it. We feel like a quick tangent. Tangents are good. Make sure I'm connected to the database. Yep, we're connected to the database. It was yesterday. I swear this was working yesterday. db.entities. No, this isn't working. This was working. I promise this was working the other day. In fact, you saw this working just a moment ago. Just kind of refresh everything. Oh, current schema database, introspect database. Here we go. db.entities. No, it's not giving me my tab completion. It's kind of really funny. That was definitely working before. I don't know. I am at a loss. It was working. All right, back to where I was. I'd say trying to run a query while it didn't have a connection has put something into a funny state. Okay, so this isn't what I was expecting, because the client understands chunk invalidations. So I was expecting this to be able to go off and fetch those chunks. So let's go and throw a breakpoint down and see what it is that we're sending back to the client. Throw a breakpoint on here. Stuff is likely to break here. That's okay. So let's look at our index. By ID should have lots and lots and lots of values in it. It does. Why does it have lots of values? Shouldn't have lots of values. Because every single chunk should have too many items in it at the moment because I'm still not clearing stuff out. By chunk, strangely, no chunk has more than 5 items in it. Okay, this is going to be something dumb. Invalidated chunks. Oh, it does have a single one in there. We have an invalidation message for single chunk. I'm going to have to step through this code. Fun, fun, fun. Okay, first things first. We come in here. We have 584 entities we want to send back to the client. Excellent. Or might want to send back to the client. So we now step down here. We grab a chunk key. Let's just get rid of some of this garbage. Our chunk key is 2,1. Great. We have one. We look it up. Doing? Oh yeah, that's just checking if it's been previously invalidated. Look up the client version of the entity, which should be undefined. Client entity is undefined. Excellent. So we generate an update, which should generate a proper update. And here we have Yeah, we've got a couple of components. This is a flat stone that we're generating one for. Nice. So we come through here. This is all boring. Our by ID should now have a single item in it. No, we've got 2 items in it. I've missed the first run through here for some reason. That's okay. So what I'm going to do, I believe this code will just work at this point. This is just going to realize that we've not overflown a chunk. And then we're just going to return the whole thing with the updated stuff. So that's all good. I now run through. Now what I'm looking at here is what by ID is equal to. 3 items in here, 4 items in here. It's okay. 5 items in here. So this is at the maximum. So I think this is still okay. We're going to step through here. We come through and we return the correct item. It's as we add a 6th, which is here. So this is where things are broken, because I expect this to mark this chunk as invalid. Wait, what? By ID? Ah, okay. So I mentioned before that we had 2 copies of something, 2 items. I think I'm already... Oh, no, this is okay. Sorry, don't mind me. The problem here... Well, I don't know. We're processing this many entities. This is not the thing I want to be debugging. It's entities in chunk I care about. So once entities in chunk overflows, so it's this entities in chunk dot length. Entities in chunk dot length is 6. So we are overflowing at this point. Excellent. We step over. We theoretically, and this is this nasty code, our keep chunks should have everything except for whatever our current entity's chunk is. Well, chunk key is 2, 1. So keep chunks should not have a 2, 1 in it. Check index by chunk only has 2, 1 in it. Cool. So keep chunks should just be an empty object. And keep chunks is an empty object. Okay. So now we're going to return our index, which was these IDs. That's fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We should now have a 6th index added. By chunk should become an empty object. And invalidated chunks should have a single item in it. Single item. Something's not right here. So let's run through to our next iteration. Index by ID has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's correct. By chunk is indeed empty. And invalidated chunks does indeed have an item in it. Okay. This is going to be something so silly. Welcome back, Griffic. You're about to see me facepalm as soon as I work out what I've done here. I assume it's not my reuse of a variable name up here. I think this is all legit. As I step through, our chunk key, I think, is 2,1. Yep, 2,1. Just for so people know how I'm debugging this, IntelliJ puts any values it thinks are relevant, it just puts on the end of the line. Or I could go and find it down in here. There it is, chunk key 2,1. But I just tend to use this one up here. Now, index.invalidated chunks, chunk key I expect to be true, but it's not. Oh, wait. That says chunk key. That's meant to be 2,1. So I've forgotten to put square brackets around something. It's not quite facepalm worthy. That is meant to be square brackets. That I would just call a legitimate bug. I'm not too embarrassed about that one. Close this out. I have no idea what state that'll be in otherwise. Our server is running. We've got a session, so we're generating packets out to the session. Let's just see what we're going to send out. We do have 583 entities still, but our index this time has, I'll use index by ID. Oh, this is, okay, this is wrong. In this case, by ID should actually be empty, and this is just a straight out mistake. So sure enough, yes, we're generating a bunch of chunk invalidations. Awesome. But when we generate a chunk invalidation, we should be suppressing that entity from the list of entities by ID. All right. My other way of doing that, because that might complicate my code and break something else, my other way of doing that is actually going to be to change this code in here to do this. We'll go entity updates is going to be, if we go index by chunk, because the by chunk doesn't have the entities for invalidated chunks in it. So if I grab those values, this is an array of arrays. So I'll just flatten those, reduce result entities goes to ... result ... entities. That should flatten it. And then I need to go and... Oh, and that's got the actual updates. I think I was meaning to store IDs in there, but all right. Yeah, I'm meaning to store IDs in that array, in that index. So let's just fix that up. When I append... Oh God, I hate Windows. uh, or just use Sigwin. If you're stuck on Windows, use Cygwin. It's able to do all that kind of stuff, or the built-in Bash command prompt that's in Windows these days. I think Windows 8. Okay. Where do I send through? Here we have a chunk key. Entities in chunk should not be update. That should be entity.id. So I'm going to store not entity updates, but strings. These are going to be just the IDs. Otherwise, I'm storing 2 copies of all of the entity updates, which is just pointless. And then in here, we're going to do a dot reduce on that and a dot map for ID goes to index.byId ID. All right. Stop the server. Restart the server. I don't think we'll hit this breakpoint anymore because I don't believe I have any live sessions. All right. Here we go. We've got a message coming through. Let's just step out. That's not where I expected to land. I'm a bit confused here. We grabbed the entities. Let's just go and stop here. Okay, we're crashing. That's all right. It's the reduce. It doesn't like reduce of an empty array with no... Yeah, fair enough. Here's a typical delta. We have no entity updates, which is what I expect. And we've got a bunch of chunk invalidations. A few more chunk invalidations than I was expecting, but 30 seems excessive. -1, -2, -2, -1. Oh, I'm searching in a fairly large radius here, am I? Yes. Yeah, I think this is reasonable then. In fact, for testing, I'm just going to change that radius to be 1. So that will go out a full chunk and a half beyond the player. Welcome back, a random guy. I take it you couldn't sleep. Oh no, you were focusing on your game. Sorry. Now I am going to have to finish up pretty soon. I just want to try and get this to a point where it kind of does something useful, even if it's exactly what it was doing before. Hey, okay. Why is that player moving? Oh, I know why that player's moving. Um, there's a mismatch between the player IDs, and my client, for some reason, doesn't realize that that is my player ID. So there's a bug. Um, and I've got a little bit of entity smoothing happening, like movement smoothing, and it's obviously not working. Oh, he's pushing me all over the place. Okay, so I'm going to ignore that. Ah, second letter. Excellent. Okay, so I am going to finish up here. What I need to do next is I need the client to send back ACKs for two things. I need it to send back an ACK when it receives one of these messages, and that will allow the server to go and update its state. So the behavior I expect is when the client first connects, we'll get a bunch of these invalidations come through. Then once everything's been invalidated, the deltas should be much, much smaller. Yeah, so Graphic, the letters from a random guy are the title of a random guy's game, but I'm refusing to repeat any letters. I believe I'm allowed to say H is the second letter of the title. It's one letter per stream. Okay. So when a player joins, we'll get a bunch of invalidations come through. Those invalidations will get ACKed. That will cause the new state to propagate through to the client state object that we're storing. So once we've received an ACK, the next packet out from the server should be a much smaller packet. In fact, it'll be empty if it's the only player in there because no entities will be moving. So that's what I'm going to work on next. I don't think this netcode change is going to make it into the next devlog episode. But so the next devlog episode will be just about porting the pickup and drop code across to the server, and announcing the giveaway for those JetBrains the rider licenses that JetBrains has kindly provided. So yeah, I think that wraps it up for today's stream. I'm going to try to stream tomorrow morning. It'll probably just be a short one though. So yeah, until next time, thank you everyone for joining, and I will see you next time.